I want to tell you about the morning of September the 3rd, 1871, when I carried a child out of the Caldwell house before dawn and handed her to a woman I had never met and have never seen since. The child was 11 weeks old. She had a small red mark on her left wrist, the kind that fades in time, and I do not know if it faded. I know that I carried her down the back stairs in the dark so that the household would not hear. And I know that when I stepped out into the yard, the air was cold in the way that September mornings in the valley are cold, with a sharpness that tells you summer is finished. I know that I handed her to a woman sitting in a wagon with no lantern, and that the wagon moved away down the lane, and that I stood in the yard until I could not hear the wheels anymore. Then I went back inside. I washed my face at the kitchen basin. I put water on for the morning coffee. At 6 o'clock, I rang the bell for the household. At 6:30, I served breakfast to William Henry Caldwell and his wife Catherine and their children, as I had done every morning for 8 years. No one said anything different from what they said on any other morning. William Henry Caldwell asked for more butter for his bread. I brought it. I continued to work in that house for 18 more years. I am telling you this now because I am 70 years old, and there is no one left in that house who could be hurt by it. William Caldwell has been in the ground since 1889. Catherine Caldwell died in 1901. The house was sold in 1903, and the family that bought it did not know its history. I am telling you this because I have carried it for 49 years, and a thing carried that long needs to be set down, even if the only place to set it is into words that no one may ever hear. My name is Margaret Ann Whitfield, born Calder in Augusta County, Virginia, in the year 1849. My father was James Calder, who farmed limestone country in the Middle Valley between Staunton and Waynesboro, and my mother was Eleanor Calder, born Hicks, who was the most capable woman I have known in a long life of knowing capable women. I was the eldest of 5 children, and I grew up understanding that being eldest meant being useful, which meant working, which I did without resentment because in the household I grew up in work was not a punishment but the ordinary texture of living. The valley in those years before the war came was a place of a particular kind that I do not think exists anymore. It was a farming country, limestone and hardwood and river bottom land, and the people who lived in it depended on each other in practical and daily ways. The knowledge of your neighbor's circumstances was not nosiness, but mutual insurance, a system of informal obligation that functioned because everyone understood they were both its beneficiary and its contributor. I grew up inside that system, and I understood its value only when the war began to dismantle it piece by piece. I was 12 years old when the war started. My father went to the war in the spring of 1862. He was 41 years old, which was old for a soldier, but he went because the men in our part of the county went. He said goodbye to my mother in the yard on a Tuesday morning in April, and he said goodbye to each of us children in order of age. And when he got to me, he held my face in his hands and said I was to take care of my mother and my brothers and sisters, and that he trusted me to do it. Then he walked down the lane and did not look back. He did not come back either. He died in the summer of 1863 at a place called Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. He died in a field on the 3rd day of a battle that lasted 3 days, and we received the news in a letter from a man who had been standing near him, a man we did not know, who described my father as brave and good. I have never known exactly how to weigh a compliment that comes in the same envelope as the news that the person being complimented is dead. After my father died, my mother continued to run the farm with myself and my 2 younger brothers. We managed. It was not comfortable managing, but it was managing. And I think of that period as one in which I learned what I was made of. The way you learn what a piece of cloth is made of by pulling at it. Either it holds or it doesn't. I held. It was in this context that my mother made the arrangement with the Caldwells. I want to be exact about what this arrangement was. The Caldwell family, who owned a large property on the eastern edge of the county, a house called Ashford Hill, with 600 acres of farmland and a limestone house of 8 rooms, sent word through a neighbor that they needed household help. My mother, who had a farm she could not run alone, and 4 children below me who required feeding, sent me. I was 14 years old. I want you to sit with that number for a moment before I continue. The arrangement was that I would live in the Caldwell house and work for my board, and a small wage that would go back to my mother. I would be treated decently. My mother believed this because the Caldwells had a respectable name in the county, and because she did not have the luxury of disbelieving it. I believed it because I was 14 and had not yet learned the full catalog of what decency does and does not mean in a house where one person has all the power and another person has none. I walked to Ashford Hill on a Monday morning in October of 1863, carrying everything I owned in a cloth bag. It was 4 miles from our farm to the Caldwell property. 4 miles of limestone road through the valley with the Blue Ridge to the east and the Alleghenies to the west, and the sky the particular blue of October in Virginia that I have never seen duplicated anywhere else. The Caldwell house sat at the end of a long lane of oak trees, and the house itself was a 2-story building of dressed limestone with windows that reflected the light clearly. Not wavy like our farmhouse windows, but flat and new. There were 2 large barns, a spring house, a smokehouse, and a root cellar dug into the hillside behind the kitchen. It was a working farm as well as a fine house, which is to say it was a place where a great deal of labor was required, and where the people who performed that labor were not the people who sat at the dining table. I was met at the door by a woman named Harriet Bird, who was the head of the household staff, and who was, I would come to understand, the actual mechanism by which the house functioned. She was a tall woman of 40 years, with a direct manner of speaking, and eyes that took your measure quickly, and did not revise their assessment without cause. She looked at me standing on the porch with my cloth bag and said, "You are the Calder girl." I said I was. She said, "Come inside then." That was the beginning of 18 years. Mrs. Bird showed me the kitchen, the pantry, the cellar stairs, the linen press, the location of every tool and vessel and provision in the working part of the house with the thoroughness of a person who understood that a household runs on exact knowledge. She showed me where I would sleep, which was a small room off the kitchen, with a bed and a chest of drawers, and a window looking onto the kitchen garden. She told me my duties, which were substantial. She told me the hours, which were long. She told me the rules, which were clear. The rules were: you do not enter the front rooms without being called. You do not speak to the family unless spoken to first. You do not discuss the family's business outside this house. You address Mr. Caldwell as Mr. Caldwell and Mrs. Caldwell as Mrs. Caldwell. You come when you are called, and you finish what you start, and you do not complain where anyone can hear you. I understood these rules. I understood that the consequences of violating them were not trivial, that I was in this house because my family needed what this house provided, and that the providing would stop if I made myself unwelcome. I was 14 years old, and I understood this with a clarity that people with comfortable lives do not usually acquire until much later, if they acquire it at all. I met William Henry Caldwell the following morning at breakfast, when I brought the coffee into the dining room, where he sat alone reading a letter. He was 42 years old, a broad man with dark hair going gray, and a face that was handsome in a solid architectural way, the kind of face that does not change much between youth and age, only becomes more fixed in its expressions. He looked up when I set the coffee down and looked at me in a way I did not have the experience to fully name at 14, but that I have since named many times. He said, "You are the Calder girl from over on the Limestone Road." I said I was. He said, "Your father served." I said he had. He said, "Good man, your father," and went back to his letter. I went back to the kitchen. Mrs. Bird was standing at the stove with her back to me and said without turning, "You will learn to move quietly in this house. Not so quietly that people don't know you're there. Quietly enough that they don't have to think about it." I said I understood. She said, "Good." I was 14 years old. I had no idea what was coming. I am not sure that knowing would have changed anything, which is perhaps the most honest thing I can say about the years that followed. The first year in the Caldwell house, I learned the work and I learned the family. I learned that Catherine Caldwell was not a cold woman, but a careful one, a woman who had learned to manage the distance between what she knew and what she was permitted to say about what she knew, and that this management required a great deal of energy that expressed itself as stillness. I learned that the three children, Thomas, who was 15, Eleanor, who was 12, and Robert, who was 8, were as different from each other as three children raised in the same house can be. Thomas was already becoming his father, which is to say he was becoming a person who understood the world as a series of resources to be managed, some of which were people. Eleanor was a quiet girl with her mother's coloring and a particular quality of attention, the kind that notices what other people have decided not to notice. Robert was simply a child, still permitted to be something other than a representative of the family's character. I learned Mrs. Bird, which took longer because she revealed herself in practice rather than in declaration. She was fair in the particular way of someone who has thought carefully about fairness and decided it is more efficient than the alternative. She did not make things harder for me than they needed to be, and she did not make them easier. She told me when I was wrong once, not twice. She told me when I was right once, not twice. She had been in the Caldwell house for 20 years and knew it the way you know something you have tended carefully for a long time. Not just the surface, but the structure underneath. I learned William Henry Caldwell last, and carefully. He was a man of considerable charm. I say this clearly because charm is a real thing, and not saying it would be its own kind of dishonesty. He was intelligent and educated. He had read widely, and he could speak with authority on any subject that came up in the conversation of a household of his kind. He was respected in the county. He was a deacon of the Presbyterian Church. He was known as a fair man in his business dealings. His friends spoke well of him and meant it. He was also a man who understood, at a level below conscious calculation, that certain things were available to him in his own house that were not available elsewhere, and that the circumstances of the people in it meant that the ordinary checks on what a man of his kind could take did not apply in the same way they applied outside. I was 14 when I came to the house, and he paid me no particular attention in that first year. I was new and useful and otherwise invisible, which was the appropriate condition and which I had been instructed to maintain. It was in my second year, when I was 15 and had grown in the ways that girls grow between 14 and 15, that the attention changed. It changed slowly. I want to be accurate about this because the slow change is part of what I am describing. It was not sudden. It was a series of small adjustments, each one by itself interpretable innocently, that accumulated into something that could not be interpreted innocently. A comment about my appearance just inside the line of a compliment. A way of standing near me when he came to the kitchen, closer than necessary. A tendency to speak to me directly when Mrs. Bird was elsewhere. A quality of attention that was not comfortable to be the object of, even before I fully understood what it meant. Mrs. Bird understood what it meant before I did. I know this because of something she said in the spring of 1865, standing at the kitchen table shelling peas. She said, without looking up, that there are situations in this house that you are not responsible for creating, but that you will be responsible for managing, and that the managing of them is something she could not do for me, and that the important thing was not to be alone in rooms where I did not need to be alone. She said nothing else. She went back to shelling peas. I understood exactly what she was telling me, even though she had not said it directly, which was the only way she could tell me, and I understood also that she was telling me because she thought it was possible to be told, which was a form of respect I did not take lightly. I tried to be careful. I arranged my movements in the house so that I was rarely alone in a room where I did not need to be. I was quick with errands that took me into the front rooms. I stayed in the kitchen when the kitchen allowed it. I did these things not visibly, because visibility would have caused problems of its own, but as the constant background management of a situation that required managing. I was 15 years old, and I was performing this management alongside every other task the house required of me. That management was work, real work, with a real cost, every day. The war ended in the spring of 1865. The men who returned came back changed in ways that varied widely in how visible the changing was. The Caldwell farm had survived better than most, which had to do partly with its location, and partly with William Caldwell's particular gift for managing situations, so they went less badly. Ashford Hill emerged from the war years with its main structure intact, and more of its provisions than most comparable properties retained. In the years after the war, the house settled into a new version of its ordinary life. Thomas went back east for additional schooling, and returned in 1868 as the person he was going to be for the rest of his life, his father with the rougher edges smoothed. Eleanor married in 1870. Robert was at school, and I was 19 years old. which meant I had been in the Caldwell house for 6 years and had learned everything there was to learn about its functioning. By 1868, Mrs. Bird's health had begun to fail in the slow, inconclusive way of certain kinds of failing. She continued to work. She continued to instruct me. But I was doing more of the managing and she was doing more of the directing, and we both knew what that meant for what was coming. It was in this period, in the spring of 1869, that the situation with William Caldwell moved from the category of something I was managing to the category of something that had already happened. I am going to say this plainly because I have thought for a long time about how to say it, and plain is the most honest. I was 19 years old, and I was in a house far from my family, and dependent on that house for my living and for what I sent home to my mother. And William Henry Caldwell was a man of 48 who owned the house and everything in it, including, in the ways that mattered practically, me. I will not describe what happened in detail, because the detail is not the point, and because it belongs to me and I am choosing not to share it. What I will tell you is that it was not violent in the way that word is usually meant, and that this is not the same as saying it was chosen. I will tell you that it happened more than once, and that I managed it the way I managed everything else in that house, which is to say, I found the ways to minimize it and the ways to continue functioning, and the ways to be present without being destroyed by being present. Catherine Caldwell knew. She was not a foolish woman and had lived with William Henry Caldwell for 25 years and understood his nature better than anyone. She managed her knowing the way she managed everything she knew, which was to arrange it into a form that allowed her to continue living her life. I am not angry at her. She was a woman in a situation with fewer options than mine, which is a strange thing to say about the mistress of a large house, but it is true. Her options were defined by what leaving would have cost her, which was everything, and what staying cost her, which was something she had learned to pay. I understood her choices eventually, and understanding them did not require excusing them. By the winter of 1870, I knew I was with child. I knew before I was certain, because the body knows these things before the mind is willing to. There was a change in me, something in the quality of my mornings and the tiredness of certain afternoons that I identified without wanting to and confirmed by counting, twice, carefully, in the privacy of my room. The counting came to the same number both times. I did not tell anyone for 6 weeks. I was not hiding. I was thinking. I was trying to understand what was true about my situation. All of it, not just the immediate fact, but the implications in every direction I could see. I was 21 years old, pregnant with the child of the man in whose house I lived and worked, with no money of my own, and no legal standing of any kind that would have been useful. The options available to me were not many, and none of them were without cost. I told Mrs. Bird on a Thursday morning in early February of 1871, in the kitchen before the rest of the house was awake. I told her plainly. I said I was with child, and I said whose it was, and I said I needed her help to think about what to do. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "He will need to be told today before this goes further." She did not mean it was my task to tell him. I do not know what passed between them. What I know is what Mrs. Bird told me that evening. I was to continue my work as normal. The child, when it came, would be placed with a family in a county at some distance, a family known to William Caldwell and reliable. I would return to my duties. The matter would not be spoken of in the house. My wages would be increased by $4 a month. I understood this was not generosity. It was a transaction. I said nothing when she told me this. She said, "Margaret, I need to know if you understand." I said I understood. She said, "You have no good options here, and the one I've described is the least bad of them." I said I had already thought about it. She said, "Good." Then she went back to her work, and I went back to mine. The months that followed were the most difficult of my life, and also, in a strange way, among the most concentrated. Everything else fell away. The work of the house, which I continued to perform, was simpler than it had ever been, because its requirements were clear and finite and within my ability to meet. The other thing, the larger thing, required a different kind of attention. The attention of someone preparing for a known event whose emotional weight is not yet fully real. My mother came in May when it was no longer possible to hide the situation from family. She came for 3 days and slept in my room with me. And during those 3 days, we had the most direct conversations we had ever had. She asked me what I wanted. I told her that what I wanted and what was possible were not the same thing, and that I had made my peace with this. She held my hands and did not say anything for a while, and then she said she was sorry, in a way that was not about specific blame, but about the larger fact of the situation and her part in having brought me to it. I told her I did not blame her, which was true. Then we talked about practical things, which was how we both preferred to handle the weight of things we could not change. The child was born on the 22nd of June, 1871, in my room off the kitchen, with a midwife from Staunton and Mrs. Bird present. It was a girl. She was small and complete in the way of new things, and she had a red mark on her left wrist that the midwife said would fade. I held her for the first day, and the second day, and part of the third day, and I will not describe what those days were like because they are mine, and because describing them accurately would require a language I do not have. I will say that I understood during those days the full weight of what was happening in a way I had not fully understood before she was real and present and looking at me with eyes that had not yet decided what color they were going to be. I had given her a name in my own mind, which was Clara, though no one used this name, and no one would. On the 11th week, in the first days of September, William Caldwell told Mrs. Bird that the arrangements had been made, and a woman was coming to collect the child on the 3rd of the month. Mrs. Bird told me. I said nothing. She said, "Margaret." I said, "I heard you." She said, "Do you need more time?" I said there was no more time to have. She said that was true. I want to stop here and tell you something that is harder to say than the facts of the situation, because the facts I have had 49 years to arrange, and the harder thing I have not entirely arranged even now. I was not devastated in the way stories like mine are usually told. I want to be honest about this because I have heard other accounts of women in situations like mine, and the telling almost always includes a complete breaking apart, a grief so large it redefined everything. I am not saying that grief is wrong or that other women were wrong to feel it that way. I am saying that what I felt was different, and that the difference is part of the truth of my situation, and I will not falsify it to make the story fit a shape it did not have. What I felt was a cold clarity, the clarity of someone who has been managing an impossible situation for 2 years and who now has a new version of the same impossible situation to manage. I looked at the requirements and began, in the way I had always dealt with practical demands, to think about how to meet them. The child was not yet fully real to me in the way she would become. I am not proud of this or ashamed of it. It was what I had, and what I had was a mind that worked, and a will that had been tested and had not broken, and I used what I had. On the 2nd of September, I sat in my room with the child for the last evening, and I did not sleep. I sat with her, and I memorized her the way you memorize something you understand you will not see again, not the way you look at something you expect to always have access to, but with the specific attention of someone who knows that this is the last chance to look. In the early hours of the 3rd of September, before the house was awake, I did one last thing. I took a piece of blue ribbon from the sewing box in my room, a short length, and I tied it around her left wrist, just above the red mark. It was a small thing. I thought of it at the last moment, in the dark, as something that would be hers to keep if the people who received her allowed her to keep it. Something that was from me, even if she never knew it was from me. Then I carried her down the back stairs. The kitchen door opened quietly. The yard was cold and dark, and the only sound was the ordinary September sound of crickets. At the end of the lane there was a wagon with no lantern, and a woman sitting in it, heavy-set and practical-looking, with an expression that was not unkind, but was not interested in my situation beyond the requirements of it. She reached her arms out when I got close enough. I looked at Clara for a moment, at the ribbon on her left wrist, at the mark underneath it. Then I gave her to the woman. The wagon moved down the lane. I stood in the yard until I could not hear the wheels anymore. Then I went back inside. I washed my face at the kitchen basin. I put water on for the morning coffee. The house woke up around me the way it woke up every morning, gradually and in a specific order. And at 6 o'clock I rang the bell, and at 6:30 I served breakfast to William Henry Caldwell and his wife Catherine and their son Thomas. No one said anything different from what they said on any other morning. William Caldwell asked for butter. I brought it. I will tell you the truth about that morning, because the truth is less simple than what people might expect, and I have always thought the less simple truth is worth more than the version that fits a shape people recognize. I did not weep at the table. I did not break any of the dishes. I did not look at William Henry Caldwell with anything other than the same face I had always presented to him in this room, which was the face of someone whose function was practical and whose inner life was not his business. I perform my work with the same attention I always had. This is not because I felt nothing. It is because feeling and functioning are not the same thing. And I had learned over 8 years in that house to keep them in separate rooms inside myself. And this morning required that the door between them remain closed. I closed it. I continued to close it for a long time after that, long enough that eventually the closing became less effortful, and then became simply the ordinary condition of how I moved through the days. The $4 a month continued. I sent it home along with the rest. I did not tell my mother what the extra money was, and she did not ask, because she understood the way things work in houses like the Caldwell house. and understood that knowing would not change anything and might make things harder. We were both practical women who had learned to carry what we carried without putting it down in places where it would cause additional damage. I continued to work in that house for 18 more years. Those 18 years are not nothing. I want to be clear about this because there is a version of a story like mine in which everything after the central event is merely aftermath, a long gray coda to be survived rather than lived. My life was not that. Even inside a situation that was wrong in ways I understood clearly, even inside a house that contained a man who had taken something from me that was not his to take, there were 18 years of real living. I will not reduce them to a footnote because the situation that contained them was unjust. Mrs. Bird died in the winter of 1873. She died in her room off the kitchen, and she died in the way she had lived, without ceremony and without requiring anything from anyone they were not prepared to give. 3 days before she died, she called me to her bedside. She was in her bed, smaller somehow than the room suggested she should be. She said, "Sit down." I sat. She said she wanted to tell me something while she still had the clarity to say it correctly. She said, "What happened in this house was not your fault, and it was not manageable in any way that would have left you better off than you are." She said, "You have handled an unhandleable situation with more grace than it deserved." She said, "When I am gone, you will be responsible for this house in a way that has no name for it, and you should know you are capable of that responsibility, even though it will not be given to you with that name." I looked at her, and then I said, "Why did you not leave in all those years?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I had nowhere better to go, and here I was needed. And being needed is not nothing," she said. And I thought I could keep an eye on things, which I could not entirely, but I kept the eye I had. She died on a Thursday. The house continued to run because it had been built to run, and I ran it. And if anyone in the county noticed that the Caldwell household was now managed by a woman whose name was not mentioned in any context, that acknowledged what she actually did, they did not remark on it to me. The years between Mrs. Bird's death and William Caldwell's death in 1889 were the years in which I understood most clearly what my position in that house was and was not. I was not a servant in the narrow sense anymore, which is to say I was not someone who did specific assigned tasks and was otherwise invisible. I was the person who made the house function, which is a different and larger thing, and I did it with a thoroughness that expressed itself as invisibility, because the most efficient management of a complex household is the kind where the management is not noticed. I was noticed when things went wrong, which they rarely did, and not noticed when they went right, which was the ordinary condition. Thomas had taken over more of the farm management by the late 1870s, and William was often in Staunton on business. The house itself fell more completely under my daily authority than it had in the years when Mrs. Bird was alive. I hired and dismissed household help. I managed the household accounts. I ordered provisions and supervised the kitchen, and maintained the linen and the silver, and the condition of every room. I did all of this under the nominal authority of Catherine Caldwell, and the nominal oversight of William Caldwell. But the truth was that I made the decisions and they were enacted, and the decisions were good ones, and the house showed it. What I did not have in any of those years was anyone who acknowledged this. not in words, not formally. I was paid my wages, which by 1880 were better than 1871, but still a fraction of what a manager of an establishment that size would have received in any arrangement, where the manager was recognized as a manager. I had my room off the kitchen. I had Sundays when the household did not require me, which it often did. I had the satisfaction of work done well, which is real, and I do not diminish it. And underneath all of this, I had the thing I carried every day, which was a name I had given to a child I could not keep, and had handed to a woman in a wagon on a cold September morning in 1871. I thought about Clara every day. This is simply the truth. Not every hour, not in the constant pressing way of fresh grief, but every day in the way of something that has become part of the structure of how you move through time. I would see something in the morning light, or find myself calculating an age the way you do when you know a date of birth, and I would think about her, about what 18 or 20 years would look like on a person I had last seen at 11 weeks old. I did not look for her. I want to explain this rather than simply state it. I did not look because looking required resources I did not have, not just money, though I had no money of my own in any meaningful amount, but also the kind of access to records and networks of information that a person in my position did not possess. The family she had gone to was known to William Caldwell, and that was all I knew, and he was not going to tell me more. There was also something else, which I am more reluctant to say, but will say anyway. I was afraid of what I would find, not fear that paralyzes, but the considered fear of someone who has thought about two possible versions of a thing and found both painful, and who has decided that the pain of not knowing is the more manageable one. If Clara was well and cared for, finding her meant introducing a disruption that came from my needs and not hers. If she was not well, knowing this would be a different weight than the one I was already carrying, and I was not certain the different weight was one I could bear and still function. I have never been certain that reasoning was correct. I am still not certain. William Henry Caldwell died in November of 1889. He died of a failure of the heart, which has a kind of literal quality in the case of certain men, though I am aware that observation says something about me and not about the medical facts of his condition. He died in the bedroom at the top of the stairs, with his family around him, and he died with the house in order, because I had made sure it was in order. He died, as far as I know, without saying anything to Catherine or to anyone about the arrangement of September 1871. Thomas came to me the morning after and said my services would continue to be required and that my wages would remain as they were. He was 41 years old, and he looked at me with the particular look of a man who knows something he has chosen not to examine too closely, and who is relying on you to make the same choice. I said I understood. He said good. He went back to the business of the estate. Catherine Caldwell lived until 1901. The 12 years between her husband's death and her own were the years in which she and I came closest to something that could be called an honest understanding. With William gone, the particular performance his presence had required of both of us was no longer necessary, and what remained between us after 28 years in the same house was something that was not friendship, but was not nothing either. It was the understanding of two people who had been present for the same long event, and who had processed it differently, and who now, in the absence of the primary figure of that event, could acknowledge in their separate silences that they had both been there. She did not speak to me directly about what had happened. She never did, not once in all the years. But there were moments, small ones, in the last years of her life, in which something passed between us that was different from the ordinary transactions of the household. Once, in the spring of 1899, she said to me, without context, as I was leaving the room, that she knew I had managed things she had not managed, and that she was not unaware of this. I did not turn around. I said I had done my work as well as I could. She said yes, and did not say anything else, and I left the room. 2 years later, she called me to her bedside 4 days before she died, and told me something. I am not going to tell you what she told me, because it was given to me alone, and I have decided to keep it that way. I will say that it changed the shape of certain things I had understood incorrectly, and left other things exactly as they were, and that I sat with it for a long time after she was gone, working out what it meant for the 18 years I had spent in that house. She left me $40 in her will, and a wool coat that had been good quality once. Thomas delivered this information with the expression he used for everything since his father died, which was the expression of a man performing an inherited role he has not fully decided how to perform. I thanked him. I packed my things, which fit into a cloth bag of roughly the same size as the one I had arrived with 38 years earlier. I walked out of Ashford Hill in October of 1901. I was 52 years old. I had spent 38 years in that house. I had $40 and a coat and a rented room waiting for me in Staunton, and whatever else I had accumulated that could not be put in a bag. On my way down the lane, I walked past the post oak at the gate, the large one that had been there longer than the house. I put my hand on its bark for a moment. I do not know why. Then I walked on. I lived in Staunton for the years after I left Ashford Hill, in a rented room on a quiet street 2 blocks from the Presbyterian Church, where William Caldwell had been a deacon for 30 years. I took in work where I could find it, managing households temporarily when ordinary arrangements broke down, sitting with the sick when families needed relief, doing the kind of useful, necessary work that has no formal name and is compensated less than it deserves, and is performed mainly by women who have learned that the alternative to useful work is dependence. I was a practical woman in a practical situation, and I managed it practically. I had spent my entire adult life developing exactly the skills the situation required, and there is a satisfaction in that even when the situation is not the one you would have chosen. In the winter of 1903, 32 years after I had stood in the yard and watched that wagon move away down the lane, I began to look for Clara. I want to tell you what changed, because it was not one single thing. It was the particular arithmetic of a woman who is 54 years old and who has begun, in the quiet of certain evenings, to think about what remains and what she will leave unfinished. It was the sale of the Caldwell house that fall, which removed the last practical reason I had given myself for waiting. And it was something smaller than either of those. A December morning when I woke before dawn and lay in the dark and found myself thinking about Clara with a clarity I had not permitted in many years. Not managing the thought, not placing it behind the door where I kept such things, but simply thinking about her age, which was 32, what 32 years looks like on a person, whether she was well, whether she had ever wondered. I had spent 32 years telling myself there were good reasons to wait. Some of those reasons were true. Some of them I understood. That December morning had always been about what I was afraid to find rather than about her. There is a difference between those two kinds of waiting, and I had been living inside that difference for 3 decades without naming it clearly. That morning I named it, and I decided to stop waiting. I want to tell you what changed, what made the not looking become looking after 32 years, because it was not one thing, but several arriving in the same season. The first was that I was 54 years old and had begun to think about the arithmetic of what remained. The second was that the Caldwell house had been sold that fall, which removed the last practical constraint on my searching. The third was something smaller and harder to name. A quality of the winter light that year. A morning in December when I woke in the dark and thought about Clara with a specificity I had not allowed myself in many years, calculated her age, which was 32, thought about what 32 years looked like on a person, and understood that managing my own pain was no longer a sufficient reason to not try. I started with what I knew, which was very little. I knew that the woman in the wagon had come in September of 1871. I knew the family was known to William Caldwell. I knew the direction the wagon had taken when it left the lane, east toward the Valley Pike. I knew that William Caldwell had connections in several counties in the valley, and that the arrangement had been made quickly enough that the family was probably within a half-day's travel. I wrote letters. This is the method available to a woman without money or legal standing or access to formal records, and it is a slow method and an uncertain one, but it is a method. I wrote to Presbyterian churches in 5 counties, framing the inquiry as a family history matter, which was true in its way. I received some replies and no useful information, and continued to write. By 1905, I had broadened the search and had begun to reconstruct, from 30 years of memory, the geography of William Caldwell's connections. I had absorbed more than I knew, the way you absorb everything when you are a presence in a house that does not register you as a presence. Names and places overheard across 30 years of being invisible in rooms where things were said. I found that the accumulation was more useful than I had expected. In 1907, I had a name. It came through a minister in Rockbridge County who had been helpful without knowing exactly how helpful. The name was a family called Strother, who had taken in a child in the early 1870s and raised her as their own, a family who had moved to Ohio sometime in the 1880s and settled near a town called Xenia in Greene County. I had a family name. I had a state. I had a county. After 36 years of knowing almost nothing, this was a great deal. I wrote to churches in Greene County, Ohio. I wrote to the courthouse. 8 letters, 3 replies, and one of them contained a name and a town and what was believed to be a current address. In the spring of 1908, I purchased a train ticket to Ohio. It was the first time I had left Virginia in 59 years of living. The valley and its limestone country gave way gradually to a different kind of country, flatter and broader, with a different quality of sky. I sat in the train car and watched it change, and thought about what I was going to find, and what I was going to say, which I had been thinking about for 5 years and had not resolved. I had composed many versions of what I would say to Clara if I found her. The version that began with explanation, with the circumstances of 1871, with the attempt to make her understand. The version that began with an apology, simpler, with the advantage of not requiring her to understand anything before I had earned the right to ask. The version that began with nothing, that simply let her look at me and decide. I had not settled on any of them by the time the train arrived in Xenia on a Thursday afternoon in April. I found a room in a boarding house. The following morning, I walked to the address I had written on a piece of paper, a frame house on a quiet residential street, white painted with a porch, ordinary and well-kept. A kitchen garden at the side, just beginning to be worked for spring. I stood at the gate for a few minutes. I was not gathering courage. I was understanding that what I did next could not be undone, that once I knocked on that door, the situation would be whatever it became, and I would not be able to manage it from the edges the way I had managed things all my life. Then I went up the walk and knocked. A woman answered. She was about 40, with light brown hair and a face that was familiar to me in the way of a dream you almost recognize. She looked at me with the polite expectation of someone answering their door on a Friday morning, and I said I was looking for a woman who might be known by the Strother name, and I said I had reason to believe she had been born in Augusta County, Virginia, in June of 1871. The woman's expression changed, not dramatically, in the smaller way of someone receiving information they already have some version of. She said her name was Josephine Strother Harlan. She said her mother, who had taken the name Clara after she was grown, because she had always preferred it to the name the Strothers had given her, had died 6 weeks ago in February. She said her mother had been ill for some time. She said it had been peaceful at the end. I stood on that porch in Xenia, Ohio, on a Friday morning in April of 1908, and I understood that I had found Clara and lost her in the same moment, that the 37 years of not looking and the 5 years of looking had arrived at an end I had not prepared for in any of its versions. Josephine asked me inside. I went inside. I sat in the parlor and she brought me tea, and she sat across from me and she said, "My mother talked about this, not often and not in detail, but she knew she had been born somewhere in Virginia and given to the Strothers before she was old enough to have any memory of it. She had tried once in her 30s to find some record of where she came from. She had not found anything definitive and had eventually stopped trying, but she had not stopped wondering." Josephine reached into a drawer of the side table and took out a small cardboard box, the kind that might hold letters or keepsakes, and she held it for a moment. She said she kept things. She wasn't a person who talked about certain things, but she kept them. She opened the box. Inside, among other small objects, there was a piece of ribbon, faded to a color that might once have been blue, folded very small. She said her mother had always kept it, had never said what it was, had only said that it was old, and that it was hers from before she had memory of anything. I had tied a blue ribbon around Clara's left wrist in the dark of my room, just above the red mark, on the morning of September the 3rd, 1871, before I carried her down the back stairs. the ribbon in Josephine Harlan's hand was the same one. She had kept it for 37 years without knowing why. She had only known that it was hers from before she had memory of anything. And she had been right. It was hers. I had put it there. I did not weep in that parlor. I sat and I looked at the ribbon, and I thought about Clara with the name she had chosen for herself, and the life she had made in Ohio, and the daughter she had left behind who was sitting across from me, with her mother's eyes, which I recognized now that I was looking for them. She had been a school teacher. She had married a man named Harlan who was kind, Josephine said. In the way she said it, that meant the kindness was the most important thing about him. She had had 3 children. She had been, by every account Josephine could give, a woman who had made a full life of whatever the Strathers and Ohio and her own choices had given her to work with. I stayed for 2 hours. In the afternoon, I walked back to my boarding house. I sat in my room until it was dark. In the morning, I took the train back to Virginia. I am 70 years old, and I have one thing left to say, and it is the thing the story was for from the beginning. Every choice I made in that house was made inside a situation I did not choose and could not change. The situation was unjust. What happened to me was not something I asked for or could have prevented. I will not perform a particular kind of regret about choices made under conditions that were not of my choosing. But I will tell you this. There were years when I could have looked for Clara and did not look, when the reasons I gave myself had less to do with her and more to do with what I was afraid to find. I am not going to call this simply wrong, but I am going to call it a choice, and I am going to tell you that choices made from fear, even understandable fear, even fear that comes from real things that have happened to you, have a cost that is paid later, sometimes much later, sometimes in a parlor in Ohio on a Friday morning in April, when a woman shows you a faded ribbon in a cardboard box. I found Clara and I lost her in the same moment. I tied a blue ribbon around her wrist before I gave her away, and she kept it for 37 years without knowing why, and she chose the name I had given her in my own mind, without ever knowing I had given it, and she lived a full life and died in February surrounded by people who loved her. I was not there, so I will ask you what I have asked myself every day since that Friday morning in Xenia. Is there someone in your life you have been managing from a distance? Something you have told yourself you will address when the time is right, when the circumstances are different, when you are more ready than you are now? The readiness does not arrive the way you imagine it will. It arrives, if it arrives at all, as a woman on a porch who is already telling you that the person you came for died 6 weeks ago in February. Do not wait, whatever it is. Do not wait. That is all I have to say.